It's Tuesday, March 3, 2026. And if you follow the independent cinema space, you already know today is, well, it's a pretty heavy hitter.
Oh, absolutely. It's a massive day.
Yeah. We have two wildly different, highly anticipated indie horror movies dropping on video on demand right now, today. And the convergence of these two specific films hitting digital shelves at the exact same moment offers this perfect lens into the current state of genre filmmaking.
It really is the ideal moment to look under the hood. The genre is in this fascinating transition period because, it's never just about monsters or jump scares.
Right.
It's a high-stakes, low-budget proving ground. We're essentially looking at a microcosm of the entire entertainment industry, where the struggle to fund and distribute a film is often, frankly, more terrifying than the script itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to really map the grueling, sometimes absurd reality of indie horror production. We want to dissect how modern horror is weaponizing our digital anxieties and examine the rapidly shifting infrastructure of how niche entertainment actually reaches you.
Exactly. Yeah. And to do that, we need to lay out what we're looking at.
Yeah, we have a deep stack of sources to guide this. We're pulling from a surprisingly detailed investigative piece by a local New York radio station, Zoe 103.9, which got a hold of some raw behind-the-scenes drama.
Which is quite a read.
It really is. We're also looking at critical reception and press releases from horror blogs, Real Reviews, My Bloody Reviews, Horror Society, and the Fanzite. We've got distributor insights from the Chroma blog, some historical context from Collider, and a very candid YouTube interview transcript from the channel Watch or Pass, featuring an absolute screen legend.
The physical reality of making these films is definitely the best place to start. Let's look at the first release dropping today.
The Hermit.
The Hermit, because the story of what happened in upstate New York during production is just a masterclass in the fragility of independent filmmaking.
So The Hermit is coming to us via Uncorked Entertainment, which is run by President Keith Leopard. It's directed by Salvatore Sclafani.
And the cast is surprisingly solid for this budget tier.
Yeah, you have Melina Weissman from A Series of Unfortunate Events, Anthony Turpel from Love, Victor, and stepping into the titular role, Lou Ferrigno.
The original Hulk.
The original Incredible Hulk himself. And the premise relies on a very back-to-basics survival setup. A father takes his kids, Lisa and Eric, on a forested getaway to his secret fishing spot. They wander onto a pig farm run by a hermit named Hugo, played by Ferrigno.
Who just happens to manufacture human jerky.
As you do.
Right. It's your standard backwoods slaughterhouse conceit.
Yeah.
But the real narrative, the real horror, is what happened to the crew.
The Zoe 103.9 piece lays out a production that felt doomed from the jump. They set up shop in August 2022 at a farm in South Onondaga near Syracuse.
The local hype was actually pretty substantial.
It was. Syracuse named Ferrigno an honorary police officer in a downtown ceremony before cameras even rolled.
Which is great PR.
But once they got out to the farm, the logistics just collapsed. They were hit with relentless, heavy rain. And on an indie set, rain doesn't just mean you get a little wet.
It means you lose your shooting days. You cannot move heavy lighting trucks through knee-deep mud.
Which immediately burns through the contingency budget.
Exactly. Every hour you aren't shooting, you are still paying for gear rentals, catering, union minimums. It's a financial bleed.
But the environmental issues were just the start. The physical toll on the personnel was severe. Melina Weissman accidentally got super glue in her eye.
Ouch.
Yeah, that shuts down your lead actress for 4 days right there. And the director of photography had to be rushed out for an emergency gallbladder removal.
Losing your DP on a micro-budget shoot is catastrophic. The entire visual language of the film lives in their head. But honestly, injuries and weather delays happen on Marvel sets too. The fatal blow to the Hermit was structural. It was a complete financial disintegration.
Let's get into the mechanics of that.
Right.
Because the local article outlines a scenario that is practically a rite of passage in non-union or low-budget indie film. The crew of about 60 people alleged that the producer, Jerry Pass, initially promised them weekly paychecks.
That's the industry standard. Freelance film workers live check to check. Weekly pay is how they cover their rent while they're away on location.
Right. But Pass allegedly cited a payment processing issue and shifted the terms to bi-weekly.
Whenever a producer mentions a payment processing issue, alarm bells should ring. It is almost always a stall tactic. Here is how indie film financing typically works, and why it's such a house of cards. Producers rarely have the cash sitting in a checking account.
They just don't.
No, they use a patchwork of equity investments, pre-sales, maybe tax incentives. Often, they secure a letter of intent from an investor and use that to get a short-term bridge loan to start production.
Mm.
If the investor gets cold feet and pulls out, the bridge loan collapses, and suddenly the production account is completely empty.
Which seems to be exactly what happened here. By the third week of the shoot, the crew found out that an investor who had allegedly promised $200,000 to the production only delivered $20,000.
$180,000 shortfall on a budget of this size means the movie is effectively bankrupt. You cannot stretch $20,000 to cover payroll for 60 skilled technicians.
You've got lighting experts, sound mixers, special effects makeup artists. These people brought their own expensive gear to this muddy farm, and suddenly the money just vanished.
So by August 30th, the crew walked.
They went on strike. Ferrigno and the rest of the cast went home. The crew estimated they were owed tens of thousands of dollars in back wages. Jerry Pass went to the Syracuse Post-Standard and called the strike a mutiny.
A mutiny.
Yeah, claiming he had personally dumped $150,000 of his own money into the project to save it. But the crew felt completely exploited. And the most brutal detail from the local coverage was the crew realizing that hiring lawyers to sue the production would actually cost more in legal fees than the wages they were trying to recover.
It's a paralyzing trap. The irony is completely unavoidable here. You have a script about a literal cannibal, a man who grinds up human bodies to sustain his own enterprise. Yet the fictional slaughter is secondary to the very real, systemic financial cannibalism of the indie film industry. These crews put their bodies on the line in freezing rain, and they're the ones who absorb all the financial risk.
It casts such a dark shadow over the film. But amidst all that chaos, there is a genuinely compelling creative drive entirely centered on Lou Ferrigno.
His performance.
Yeah. We pulled the transcript from his interview on the Watch Your Pass YouTube channel, and his approach to this character is intense. First, just establishing his baseline. The man is 74 years old.
And it's still huge.
He still trains daily.
Yeah.
He mentioned he used to bench press 560 pounds and deadlift nearly 1,000 pounds during his strongman days.
He brings an imposing, dense physicality to the screen that you simply cannot fake with a foam muscle suit. But what's fascinating here is the psychological architecture he built for Hugo. It elevates this way beyond a standard slasher.
Hugo isn't just a mindless killing machine.
Exactly. Ferrigno established that Hugo's mother was a witch, and he is operating under her twisted posthumous influence. Crucially, Hugo also suffers from a severe hearing impairment, isolating him entirely from the outside world.
That detail is where the performance bridges into autobiography. Ferrigno was remarkably open in this interview about his own childhood trauma. He was born with a severe hearing impairment. He talked about the bullying he endured, being called a freak by other kids.
And the rejection from his own father.
Most devastatingly, yes. He stated his father cursed the day he was born because of his hearing loss.
That is a profound emotional reservoir to draw from. I want you to really think about how personal trauma shapes the art we consume. When a legendary actor like Ferrigno pours decades of personal pain into a micro-budget horror villain, it transforms the movie from a schlocky B-movie into a real empathetic character study.
He took that deep-seated feeling of being tormented, of wanting to retreat from a hostile world, and mapped it directly onto a cannibalistic hermit.
Think about the classic Universal monsters. Frankenstein's monster is terrifying, but fundamentally he is a tragic figure who just wants to be understood and left alone. Ferrigno is tapping into that exact lineage.
He explicitly compared his approach to someone like Jason Voorhees in the interview. Jason hides behind a hockey mask. He's a blank slate for the audience's fear. But Ferrigno wanted Hugo's tormented face and expressive eyes visible to communicate a lifetime of suffering.
Getting that look was an ordeal on its own.
2 hours in the makeup chair every single day. They applied a massive secondary beard over his existing facial hair, and he had to wear hair extensions. He was laughing in the interview, saying he had to learn how to sleep perfectly still so he wouldn't destroy the extensions overnight.
And to maintain that psychological weight on set, he method acted the isolation. He purposely avoided interacting with his young co-stars Melina and Anthony between takes.
He wanted their on-camera reactions to be fueled by genuine intimidation.
Which is a classic, highly effective technique. It grounds the absurdity of the premise. And speaking of grounding the absurd, Ferrigno casually dropped that the writer based Hugo on a real-life hermit who lived in Canada.
Right, he referred to him as Hannibal Lex.
When you tether a pulpy concept to a historical precedent, it just adds this subtle layer of unease.
The interview also had these great humanizing tangents that really lighten the mood. Despite playing this rugged, blood-soaked woodsman, Ferrigno admits he absolutely despises the real woods.
He hates the outdoors.
Hates bugs, hates snakes, hates mosquitoes. He's a gym guy, and his diet is legendary. The interviewer asked him about making jerky for the movie, and Ferrigno revealed he actually eats plain beef jerky every single night.
Specifically from Vaughn's.
Specifically the dark, plain jerky from Vaughn's. He was adamant about avoiding the sugary teriyaki flavors, noting very seriously that sugar feeds cancer cells. He even mentioned grabbing a Cliff protein bar at a gas station just to ensure he had his macros covered while shooting.
Those details are what make studying media so rewarding. When you stream The Hermit today, you aren't just consuming a horror product. You are watching a 74-year-old icon physically manifest his childhood trauma, captured by a crew of exhausted, unpaid artists standing in the upstate New York mud.
It gives the film a bruised, authentic texture, which is the perfect contrast to the second film dropping today.
It's a complete 180.
If The Hermit is analog, muddy, physical survival, Dark Distortion is entirely digital, sleek, and focused on psychological collapse.
Dark Distortion is written and directed by Joseph Herrera under his banner, Under Control Productions. It's being pushed globally on VOD by Breaking Glass Pictures, managed by CEO Rich Wolf. The narrative architecture here is incredibly modern.
It tracks a group of adult models who decide to pivot from sex work to burglary for a quick, lucrative score. They steal a camcorder, assuming it holds high-value blackmail footage.
Instead, the camera houses the restless spirit of a murdered child.
The critical reception highlights how abrasive the tone is. Real reviews stated the film feels like it crawled out of a sewer grate clutching a busted camcorder.
That's quite a quote.
As the characters watch the stolen footage, reality itself begins to glitch and tear apart. They are dragged into this vortex of possession and violence. The ensemble includes April Hartman, Ethan Vaughn, Jada J, Joe Walker, Miles Stoner, and Keona Williams.
It's drawing very deliberate comparisons to the grimy, tactile dread of things like The Ring, VHS, and Archive 81. But I want to look closely at the thematic engine driving Dark Distortion, which is the concept of attention as currency.
Right.
These characters make their living by being observed. They have monetized the male gaze. They are constantly chasing visibility. But the film inverts that power dynamic.
Yeah.
It asks a very uncomfortable question. What happens when the object you are watching begins watching you back?
Let me push back on that for a second. Is attention as currency actually terrifying to a modern audience, or is it just convenient social commentary for screenwriters? Because we live our entire lives on camera now.
That omnipresence is exactly why it's terrifying. It isn't just commentary. It's a loss of narrative control. When you are a webcam model, you control the lighting, the angles, and the boundaries of the interaction. You control the narrative.
That makes sense.
The horror of Dark Distortion is the sudden, violent stripping away of that control. The technology that previously empowered them is now the conduit for their destruction. The boundaries between sex, power, and violence disintegrate completely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the apex of modern tech horror. And from a purely mechanical screenwriting perspective, it solves a massive logistical headache.
The cell phone problem.
Yes. We looked at the Zoe 103.9 articles list of the 10 worst horror movie cliches. Number 3 on that list is bad cell phone reception. For 20 years, writers have been doing backflips to explain why a victim can't just text 911.
They drive characters into dead zones, they introduce magical electromagnetic interference, or they just have the battery conveniently die at 99%.
It's a trope born of necessity. When mobile phones became ubiquitous, they threatened to ruin the core tenet of horror, which is isolation. If you can call for help, you aren't isolated.
Exactly. But Dark Distortion bypasses the dead zone entirely. The technology isn't failing the characters, the technology is the threat.
You don't need to contrive a reason for the cell phone to lose a signal when the screen itself is the source of the haunting. The danger is coming from the device you rely on for survival.
It's an evolution from isolating the victim by removing their connectivity to isolating the victim through their connectivity. It weaponizes the network itself. And the way independent filmmakers are marketing these hyper-specific concepts is just as evolved.
Look at how Joseph Herrera is running his press tour. He isn't lobbying for a 3-minute spot on a mainstream late-night talk show. The sources show he is going directly into the trenches.
Niche platforms.
Exactly. He did an extensive interview on the Fanzite and appeared on episode 501 of Out Loud and Live with JC Alvarez.
He is targeting the diehards. He is going where the genre fans already live. And that macro shift in marketing is a perfect segue into the changing infrastructure of how these niche films are actually distributed.
It's no longer about getting your indie horror film onto 2,000 screens at the local multiplex. The entire ecosystem has fractured and rebuilt itself around direct-to-consumer curation. Enter a company like Chroma.
Chroma is a newly launched US-based global distributor, and their entire business model is predicated on independent genre films. 10 years ago, an indie distributor would fight a losing battle trying to secure physical theatrical space against massive studio tentpoles.
Today, Chroma is circumventing the theater entirely. They are curating highly specific, wildly audacious slates and beaming them directly to your television.
And the slate they have acquired is staggering. They aren't just buying standard slashers. They're picking up concepts that major studios would be absolutely terrified to greenlight.
For instance, they have a micro-budget thriller called Playhouse, and they have NFT Cursed Images, which is perhaps the most 2026 title imaginable. They also have a queer horror film called The Restoration at Grayson Manor.
The title that really caught my eye in their lineup is The House Was Not Hungry Then. We've seen the haunted house trope iterated 1,000 ways. We've seen it from the perspective of the terrified family. We've seen it from the perspective of a pet. But this film is reportedly told from the perspective of the house itself.
Which is a massive cinematic challenge. How do you shoot a movie from the POV of lumber and drywall? Is it entirely static surveillance angles? Is it experimental shifting architecture? It's a huge creative swing.
It is, and that is exactly the point of Chroma's acquisition strategy. A major studio looking for a $100 million opening weekend cannot risk an experimental architectural POV film. But a distributor looking to satisfy a dedicated global niche audience absolutely can.
It thrives in this model. They're also grabbing international genre benders. They secured the North American rights to Mashville, a South Korean film described as a whiskey-soaked kimchi western.
Incredible description.
They have an 80s revival action comedy called Blind Cop 2. They picked up a sci-fi comedy titled Operation Taco Gary's, starring Simon Rex and Jason Biggs, plus a massive catalog of other titles: The Infinite Husk, Before the Fall, The Strange Dark Decibel, Dinner to Die For, Primate, and Vicious.
Chroma is actively building a brand identity based on subversion. They want the audience to know that if a concept defies easy categorization, Chroma is the home for it. They're even seeding future projects. They're partnering with the 20th anniversary of Fantastic Fest in Austin for the Fantastic Pitches program.
Offering $100,000 to a winning pitch team.
They aren't just distributing, they are incubating the next generation of genre directors.
And Chroma is just one piece of this highly specialized puzzle. The Horror Society article covered the one-year anniversary of a streaming platform called Found TV. Their model is incredibly disciplined.
Laser-focused.
They do one thing and one thing only: found footage and analog horror. They don't have romantic comedies. They don't have prestige dramas, just shaky cam, glitchy first-person terror.
The discipline of that curation is exactly why they are succeeding. CEO Louis Lavella has built a platform available in over 120 countries. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the shift in media consumption perfectly.
To leverage that momentum, they're running a 31 films in 31 days event this October. They're premiering heavily anticipated sequels within their specific community titles like Tahoe Joe 3, I'm Haunted 4 and 5, Jabberjaw, and The Poltergeist Diaries.
They're also launching a new shorts category to elevate emerging voices right alongside the established veterans.
This represents the death of the cinematic monoculture. You no longer have to hope your local theater plays a weird found footage movie. These platforms prove that a deep, narrow audience across 120 countries is more viable than a shallow, broad audience in one country.
Think about your own streaming habits. Are you gravitating toward highly specific, curated platforms that know exactly what you want? The era of scrolling aimlessly through a massive, bloated streaming platform is ending for genre fans. Niche platforms remove the friction.
But catering exclusively to superfans comes with a catch. Superfans know the rules. They know the mechanics of the genre better than anyone, which means they are brutally unforgiving when a filmmaker relies on tired cliches.
Which brings us back to the ultimate rulebook of terror. We touched on the bad cell phone reception, but the Zoe 103.9 article listed the 10 worst horror movie cliches, and reviewing it is a hilariously accurate autopsy of lazy screenwriting.
Let's run through a few of the most egregious offenders.
The first one on their list is the foundational trope. The car won't start.
Or it magically runs out of gas precisely when the killer appears in the rearview mirror.
Right. The very first time a car engine sputtered on screen, it probably induced genuine panic.
Hmm.
Today, if a character turns the ignition key and we hear that agonizing chug 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 sound, the audience collectively groans.
It's a failure of escalation. A stalled engine is an external mechanical failure that the character has no agency over.
Modern audiences prefer suspense born from character choices,
Hmm.
not random mechanical bad luck.
Then you have excessive jump scares. The article points out that classics like The Shining and Silence of the Lambs didn't need them to build dread. Another massive point of contention is dark basements.
Why do people freely go down there?
Exactly. A character hears a terrifying noise in a pitch-black, unfinished basement, and instead of calling the police and leaving the house, they grab a flickering flashlight and slowly walk down the creaky stairs.
Is it cheap, or is it a necessary evil of the genre? Because if characters always made the smart, rational decision and walked out the front door,
The movie would be over in 20 minutes. I see your point, but consider the execution. When characters are forced into the basement, like James Kenkian in Misery, it is terrifying because the basement represents a physical manifestation of their captivity. But when they voluntarily choose to investigate the dark, it defies basic human survival instincts.
fair point. When the audience realizes the character is acting foolishly just to advance the plot, the tension evaporates. And the falling female protagonist is another one, running on flat ground and magically tripping over nothing.
Running upstairs instead of out the front door. Scream explicitly called that one out decades ago, and writers are still doing it.
It's similar to the "let's split up, gang" cliche, the absolute worst idea ever.
Splitting up guarantees that characters will be picked off one by one in the dark. It became such an absurd trope that Drew Goddard syrup work. The Cabin in the Woods actually had to write in a plot device where mind-altering chemical gas was pumped into the forest just to logically explain why the characters would make such an idiotic tactical decision.
The Cabin in the Woods is the Rosetta Stone for understanding modern horror mechanics. It acknowledged that these tropes are inherently artificial. You also have invincible killers like Jason and Freddy, and creepy dolls like Chucky, Annabelle, and the Boy.
And the final cliche I want to touch on is the ultimate lie, based on actual events. The Conjuring franchise built an empire on this phrase, taking the heavily embellished history of the Warrens and framing cinematic demons as historical fact.
But is it actually a lie? Or is it just the modern cinematic equivalent of a campfire story preamble? When you tell a ghost story, you always start with, "This really happened to a friend of my cousin." It's a framing device designed to lower the audience's skepticism.
That's true. But when the marketing implies historical authenticity for events that are clearly supernatural fiction, it borders on exploitation of the audience's trust.
Which naturally leads us to the most fascinating section of the Zoe 103.9 piece. They did a retrospective on movies that crossed lines which modern society and modern media infrastructure would simply never tolerate today.
The rules of horror aren't just about avoiding cliches. They are about navigating evolving cultural taboos. Let's examine a few of these because they chart a clear map of our shifting sociological empathy. Look at Cannibal Holocaust from 1980.
The marketing campaign was so fiercely committed to the illusion of reality that it stated the actors were actually missing and presumed dead. The director was arrested for murder until the actors showed up in court to prove they were alive.
The human violence was an illusion. But the reason Cannibal Holocaust could never be made today is the genuine animal cruelty. They killed real animals on camera monkeys, turtles, pigs. Today, the ethical line is firmly drawn.
A film featuring the unsimulated slaughter of a non-consenting animal wouldn't just be banned. The filmmakers would be aggressively prosecuted.
You also have The Evil Dead from 1981, where Sam Raimi himself has expressed regret over the gratuitous, brutal tree assault scene. Or Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS from 1975, which mined genuine Holocaust trauma for lurid sexploitation.
Another powerful example of shifting empathy is Sleepaway Camp from 1983. It is a legendary slasher, but the entire climax relies on linking the killer's psychotic pathology directly to their transgender identity.
It was a ubiquitous trope. Films frequently used gender nonconformity as a shorthand for deception or innate danger. It heavily perpetuated the idea that trans identity was a threat. A contemporary film relying on that specific prejudice shock value would be rightly dismantled today.
We also have to look at films like The Monster Squad from 1987, a kids' movie loaded with intense violence and homophobic slurs. Or Necromantic from 1987, banned in multiple countries for necrophilia and animal cruelty.
Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom from 1975, was banned globally for absolute depravity, though it is still taught in film schools. And a Serbian film from 2010 offered corrosive social criticism wrapped in nightmarish misogyny. Oh, and Snuff from 1975, deliberately marketed as a real murder, which sparked mass protests.
Then you have films that weaponize algorithmic horror, like Megan is Missing from 2011. This is a very raw, found footage film about the abduction of two teenage girls. It was largely ignored upon release, but blew up on TikTok years later.
It caused such a massive wave of genuine psychological distress that the director actually had to warn people not to watch it due to its raw depiction of violence against minors. The algorithm was feeding it directly to unsupervised kids.
This raises an important question. If modern filmmakers cannot rely on animal cruelty, prejudiced stereotyping, or boundary-breaking exploitation, how do they generate fear? We want to be scared, but where's the line?
You attack their psychology, you bypass the gore and go straight for the existential dread. The Zoe 103.9 article compiled a list of the best horror movies on Netflix right now, and analyzing their selections proves that tension has replaced transgression.
Let's look at what actually works today.
First, A24's It Comes at Night. It relies on unrelenting tension over cheap jump scares. Then you have Fear Street 1994 tapping into 90s nostalgia. Unfriended and Cam are perfect companions to Dark Distortion with their tech and camgirl anxieties.
Hush uses sensory deprivation brilliantly. His House and Under the Shadow mix sharp social commentary with terror.
You've got The Conjuring for classic execution, Crimson Peak for gothic romance, Veronica based on a real Ouija board case in Vallecas, Gerald's Game adapting Stephen King, and Creep exploiting stranger danger through found footage. And of course, Hashtag Alive, a perfect quarantine isolation film.
I challenge you to look at your favorite horror film. Does it rely on outdated cliches or offensive tropes? Or does it tap into a universal, timeless fear, like isolation or the loss of autonomy?
We have covered immense ground today. We started in the muddy, financially disastrous fields of upstate New York with The Hermit. We went into the haunted camcorders of Dark Distortion.
We navigated the rise of hyper-curated platforms like Found TV and Chroma.
And we mapped out the shifting boundaries of what scares us without offending us.
Horror is the ultimate time capsule. If you want to know what a society is truly afraid of at any given moment, look at its low-budget monster movies and found footage thrillers.
So what does this all mean? I want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder long after the audio ends. As technology makes our horror films more personalized, and streaming platforms isolate us into our own perfect niche echo chambers of terror, are we losing the communal safety net of being scared together in a crowded theater? Will the future of horror be a terrifyingly solitary experience where the scariest thing isn't what's on the screen, but the fact that you are the only one watching it? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the media you consume.